Okay, this video is going to be something you may want to see. It's going to be a little bit lengthy. For those of you who are really awake and already seen the information you're about to see at the beginning, then I would encourage you to go ahead and fast forward through to the last thing that I'm going to show you, because you'll understand it. But if you're going to get anything out of this and you're just going to say I'm awake and you've never seen the stuff that's being presented before this, then you'll probably be most likely an idiot and won't understand what's being said, because you will be lying to yourself. So if you're going to lie to yourself, then you will deserve what you deserve, okay? To come away from this video knowing nothing, okay? Or confused. I put this together in an order for those who are semi-awake. Even in the manosphere, if you're semi-awake, I had to do it in this order to give you enough knowledge to be able to physically understand what you're going to see at the end. Because at the end, it's like this. They have always told us that they were going to tell us what they were going to do. They were going to do it, and we would do nothing about it, and they've laughed in our faces. Occult knowledge is nothing but hidden knowledge. Knowledge has been kept from you. That's right. Knowledge is just like your education system. That has been kept from you, away from you, hidden from you. The end of this video is going to be some of that very knowledge that's been kept away from us deliberately. They've even made it man-made rule, law, enslavement, control, illegal for you to put this in your system. Because remember, you are a slave and they own your body. And you're not allowed to put this in your body because they don't want you to become aware that you're a slave. That's right. They don't want you to collect the knowledge they've been keeping from you. And you'll really get it when you actually physically see what I've laid together and you watch the last clip. It's going to be ding, 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 ding right in your face. And you'll be like, oh my God. There it is right there. Yeah, and it's that simple. But with that being said, that's about all I'm going to say. So watch the series that I put in front of you. The last clip I'm going to show you. If you watch what I put in front of you, you're going to go, oh my God. And that's really what I have to say. Because that's what it'll be like, okay? And then if you are, if you're like I told you, if your awokenness, knowledge is on the level of mine, you don't need to watch what I've put there. But if you're going to lie to yourself and say your knowledge is, and it's actually not, you ain't going to get nothing out of this. And then if you leave a comment when you got nothing out of it, you'll just be making yourself into a fool, and your foot will be sticking out of your mouth. And if you don't want your foot hanging out of your mouth, don't be lying to yourself. If you really haven't seen this stuff and you just don't want to take the time, I don't care if you want to stay ignorant. Exit the video off and go on your way. If you don't want to remain ignorant, then watch. Okay? With that being said, I'm out of here. Watch out.
Thank you so much for being here today, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be a great day today. I'm going to be giving a seminar here entitled Streetwise Spirituality, What Does It Truly Mean to Be Awake? And it's going to be a lot different than what many people think of as the awakening process. There's going to be a lot of points in here. I'm going to cover 20 main points as to what is true awakening, not pseudo-spiritual awakening as we may hear about in the New Age circles. So that's the title of the seminar. And but before we actually jump into the material, I'd like to give a few caveats regarding what I do and my presentation style in general. So the first thing people should keep in mind is that you will not be seeing or hearing anything, quote, new here today. As the old saying goes, there is nothing new under the sun. You hear that, many people will hear that phrase but not really understand what was meant by that phrase, that old phrase. What it means is that the truth is singular and eternal. It is not going anywhere. The truth has always been with us. It has always been there. It will always be there. Okay? All I can do personally as a presenter is get up here and present this information in some sort of a personalized format or framework with my particular style and my particular aesthetics applied to the presentation, which is what I'm going to do here today. My personal presentation style has been described by some as very intense. Now, for people who may not be familiar with my work, by a show of hands, how many people are completely new to my work? Completely new to it. That is phenomenal. That is fantastic. Okay? Now, with that having been said, you don't have any prerequisite information that I've put out there. So you have to understand, this presentation is like an amalgamation. It's like a coming together of all my former material. Okay? So with that having been said, it would probably behoove you to go back to my older material and check that out. And you could do that at my website, whatonearthishappening.com. I always tell people, go to the podcast section of that website and listen to the podcasts in order. If you do that, that opens up a worldview, a tapestry will emerge from that information from doing it like that. It's a stepwise progression. But there are people who have described my presentation style, and rightly so, I don't disagree with them, as very, very intense and sometimes even combative. And I don't really make any bones about that. It's true. Some people here today may be very likely to get upset or angered by some of the things that you'll hear me say, and that's fine. So be it. Okay? The fact of the matter is that the truth itself, by its very nature, is belligerent, especially in the time of deceit that we're living in. Okay? Because truth wages war against mind control. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm waging a war against the forces of deceit, against the forces of darkness, against the forces of mind control in this world. Okay? I do not present the information that I present to be liked. I don't care who likes me or who hates me. I'm not interested in that. This isn't a popularity contest for me. All right? I don't do this to make money, because I certainly don't make a whole lot of that. Actually, I do this to make the real money, not the fake kind, if people know what I mean by that. Money, as a word, means one eye, mon eye. I do this to make real money, not the fake Federal Reserve note variant. Okay, but I also, I don't really want to do this with my time. This isn't what I would prefer doing. I have a whole lot of other personal interests I'd like to be pursuing. I do this because I recognize that in the time that we're living in a time of such overwhelming ignorance that exists in the world and such overwhelming deception that is going on all around us, the fact that I understand the information that I do understand places me in a position of moral obligation to communicate that information to other people in an attempt to help them to understand it as well. So that's why I do what I do. Every person who is here today and wishes to take real value away from the seminar, which I would assume is all of you, after all, you are making your time available to be here and you spent money to be here, should make a conscious effort to do two specific things. while you are here. The first is to try as much as within your ability to set aside your personal perceptions of me as the presenter. And I know that can be difficult. But this includes setting aside things like how you think I personally look, how I dress, how my voice sounds, okay? Paying attention to trivialities like that are only going to distract you and detract your mental focus away from the information that is being presented, which is the important thing here, not me. I'm not the important thing here. The information is what's important. And the second thing is try to be consciously aware of any impulses that you may have to reject information based on emotional response. And that's also quite difficult for people to do. That's why I try to make these points consciously, up front. Okay, so that you're holding those ideas in your mind as we proceed. You cannot think about this information with your emotions. So you may hear things that anger you here today. It's a logical fallacy to gauge the truthfulness or the veracity of any information that you hear based solely upon how you feel when you're first hearing it. That is a trap that you can fall into. So that's why I try to make people consciously aware of it right from the jump. The last thing that I want to bring up before we start is that this seminar is a tapestry of information that is meant to be taken in as a whole, not separate or in individuated chunks, okay? It's a tapestry of information. It's designed specifically to be seen in its entirety. So I highly encourage people to gain the maximum value from the information I'm going to present here to stay for the duration of the whole seminar, at least the presentation part of it, okay? We're going to do an extended question and answer session after my presentation. But if you stay for the whole part of it, you'll recognize the pattern that I'm trying to make clear here, okay? If you don't stay for the whole thing, more likely than not, you're not going to see the entire pattern that I'm trying to lay out, and then you're not going to gain maximum value. All right, so with those things, those caveats having been said, let's jump into the information. So what this whole thing is about is what does it truly mean to be awake? We hear this word a lot, right? We hear the word awake. He's awake. He's awake to what's going on. You know, he's not unconscious. He's not asleep. She's conscious. She's awake, okay? Well, what does that really mean? And people have different thoughts about what that means. There's whole communities of people that think that that means completely different things, all right? What I'm going to try to do is present a brand new perspective on what this means. And people are going to hear some points that they probably never would have considered. All right? So I consider what these points are describing real spiritual awakening. Not, again, a pseudo-spirituality that is all too often presented as being true awakening in the modern, quote, New Age communities. All right? So the information that I'm talking about here has real-world, practical, applicable value. All right? It's about spirit in the flesh. That's the balance that I'm trying to strike here today. We're not about our head way up in the clouds, okay, without our feet firmly on the earth. This image represents in the Hermetic philosophy what was known as the stellar man or the stellar woman. The being that is of the star matter, okay? They are deeply, deeply awoken, and they understand real spirituality. So their head is in the cosmos. Their head is in the stars. But where is their feet? It is planted firmly on the earth. The work that we are to do is to be done here and now, not in some hereafter, not in some other dimension, not in some other time. It is about the here and the now. So that image is another image, that I want to set forward as an archetype for today. Spirit in the flesh, work being done on the ground, even though our mind is of the cosmos. All right? So, first point, I'm going to do 20 points of what it means to be awake, truly. 10 in the first 3 hours, 10 in the second 3 hours. Hopefully I can stick to that time framework. Point number 1, being awake means knowing about the occult and understanding that it has both light and dark aspects to it. Now, I wasn't even planning to make this point one, but as I made my slides, as I made my outline, I realized this was the most important point. And unfortunately, this is also the point that is most absent in most people who consider themselves awake. How many people here today expected to be hearing about the occult in this presentation by a show of hands? Now, it's amazing because whenever I ask how many people are totally new to my work, I get a big show of hands, and yet when I ask them how many people expected to hear about the occult, I guess I'm very well known as an occult researcher, so most people do expect to have been hearing about the occult today, which is good. But let's look at what the occult actually is. And then hopefully we'll understand why you can't be awake without knowing about it. What is the occult? When I use the term occult, what do I mean? The word occult is derived in its etymology, where it comes from the Latin occultus. The Latin adjective occultus means hidden from sight, not easily seen. All right? And that adjective comes from the Latin verb occultare. Occultare means to hide, to conceal, or to keep secret. Now, both of those words in Latin are in turn derived from another Latin word, the Latin noun oculus. Oculus means eye. Okay, so we can see right away this is all about relating to the vision, relating to what we can see and what we cannot see. And that's why I use the symbol of the all-seeing eye as the main symbol for this presentation in my title card. All right? So what we're talking about here is information that is hidden from people's sight, and it is held by very few people in the world, which are represented by the apex of this pyramidal structure here, okay? That's where knowledge is concentrated and condensed and held very tightly to the chest by some individuals. And then down here, you have the ignorant masses of humanity who have no idea about the occult at all. Zero. Okay? And they're down here in this compartmentalized and hierarchical structure in complete ignorance. Ignorance is the base of the structure. It's ultimately what's holding the people who are up here, holding that knowledge to themselves in power. All right? So keep in mind, the occult simply means, always has meant, means now, and always will mean nothing but hidden knowledge. That's all it means. It does not mean evil, it does not mean bad, it does not mean superstitious, it does not mean voodoo, or any other particular practice that people associate with the occult. All it means is hidden. So I'm trying to demystify the concept of what the occult is.
Humanity, in the way that Orwell described, and the way we're experiencing now, not even by the day, but by the bloody hour, of more and more surveillance, more and more control, more and more suppression, more and more police state. And in doing so, manipulating the way we perceive reality, so we, as the external world moves in on us, the internal world moves in on us, and we become less and less of who we are. So, let's get real bloody bizarre now. If you've never seen my stuff before, it's time to leave. Who are this non-human group or grouping behind these particular bloodlines, and how do they interact? I had to go through this, so everyone else should as well. I was minding my own business in the 1990s, and suddenly, I don't know what is this force I picked up or picked me up, I don't know, 20 years ago. But it's like opening and shutting doors and in a maze, and it says, okay, not down there, down there. Look at this. Okay, now look at that. And what tends to happen is a theme comes into my life, and suddenly things are coming at me in relation to that theme from every angle. From 2003 to now, it's been the nature of reality all the time. Just earlier to that, from the just after mid-90s onwards, I kept coming across people who were telling me they'd seen, apparently human people, turn into a reptilian form and then go back again in front of their eyes. And you think, Okay. Right. Back burner with that one. But as the months and the years passed, these were coming at me all over the world. And then I started looking at ancient texts and stuff like that, and accounts, and you could find the same stories being told all that apparently time ago. And there are many non-human entities that are interacting with this reality. But the theme that keeps coming to me over the years in relation to these bloodlines behind the Illuminati is of some form of reptilian entities, which are the next stage on, because it goes on beyond them, but the next stage on behind the Illuminati bloodlines and the interbreeders with them is this reptilian group, which sounds real strange until you go with it. Now, again, this is why the first part today is so important. These people know that the body is a biological computer. So to them, that's how they look at it. What we call procreation is the downloading of two hard drives, if you like, into one, which creates the offspring. To these people, they see that as a downloading of a computer program. And so the obsession, and this is real, goes right back to the ancient world, right up to the present day, the obsession that these bloodlines have, take royalty, aristocracy, and the major banking and business families of the world, they interbreed incessantly, and always have. And it's because, from their point of view, they are holding a software program, which is what? Information. It's a state of being. And when you interbreed that, these hybrid bloodlines, with the general population, that, to them, unique software program, computer program, starts to dilute very, very quickly. So what they're trying to do is hold that software, hold that information within the computers by interbreeding with each other. The oldest form of religion and worship so far established is serpent worship. It's massive. It goes right back. 70,000 years ago is the oldest evidence in South Africa of serpent worship. And after I'd written a book called The Biggest Secret, when I introduced this for the first time, I went to speak in South Africa, and I met this man, Credo Muchwa, who contacted the organizers of my event and said, I want to talk to this man. So I went to see him, and I spent days with him in the end. And he first said to me, he said, Mr. David, he said, how do you know about the Chitahuri? And I said, well, who are they? He said, they are the children of the serpent, the children of the python. That's what Chitahuri translates as. And he told me that when the colonial powers came into Africa, as everywhere else, they targeted the shaman and the carriers of the ancient knowledge and the ancient history of that area, and in his words, they milked the minds of the shaman and then killed them. So to keep the knowledge alive, the shaman streams started to create their own secret societies with horrendous initiation rituals to make sure you really wanted the knowledge, and they carried it underground so it would survive. Because what the colonial powers wanted, in other words, these bloodlines behind the colonial powers, they wanted to destroy as much of the ancient knowledge as possible, because then they could impose their own version of history, which would write out what they didn't want people to know. So about, what is he now, 90? Crikey. 60 years ago, nearly, he was initiated into these secret societies in South Africa, and that's when he learned about the Chitahuri, and he's gone on learning ever since. That is a painting. He's a brilliant man. He's a library on legs. That's one of his paintings of one kind of the Chitahuri, as he calls them. There are many different types, as there are different types of human. And he showed me this, what he calls the necklace of the mysteries. It's mentioned 500 years ago in accounts. He reckons it's at least 1,000 years old, and he calls it a necklace. You put it on your shoulders. Oh my God, it's so heavy. He sits there for hours with it. I don't know how he does it. And what he does, because he's the official storyteller of the Zulu nation, what he does is use these symbols to tell the story of Africa, the people of Africa. And right at pride of place at the front is a human woman and a very clearly non-human man with a big willy in come and get me mode. And interestingly, he says that was originally gold. And then someone stole it and they couldn't replace it with gold, so they replaced it with copper. But then again, this is southern Africa. You go to North Africa, and one of the key foundation stories and myths of ancient Egypt is of the golden penis of Osiris. And the more and more that I see this, these are symbolic of this bloodline, of this connection, this hybrid bloodline connection. And what Credo was saying, yeah, I used to go out with someone like that. It was good. That's the lady. And here's the guy. Now, he doesn't look very reptilian. I pointed that out to him. And he said, this is the story. The Chitahori, when they were manifesting openly in some areas, said, you must never portray us as we really are, otherwise death. So he said what people did is they portrayed them as clearly not human in various ways, but not actually as they really looked. Although if you go one stage back from Sumer, in the same area, which was the Ubaid culture which preceded Sumer in Mesopotamia, now Iraq, you do find in the graves of Ubaid graves, there have been found very clearly representations of reptilian mothers and babies and all the rest of it. This is a symbolic image by Neil Haig of this hybrid bloodline, which has we all have, and I'll come to this, we all have reptilian genetics, very, very serious reptilian genetics within the body hologram computer, but these hybrid bloodlines have much more reptilian genetics, and therefore have much more of the reptilian genetic personality, if you like. And around the world, again, it's like, have you seen that new car? No, and you see them everywhere. Again, once this reptilian thing came into my life, I started to realize just how much reptilian imagery there is everywhere, all over the world. And the ancient myths and stuff like that of the Nagas in Asia, the people who were said to be part reptilian, part human, and could move between the two. And the many images you find portrayed of this coming together of earth women and this reptilian race, and part human, part non-human, and all the rest of it. These are just a few examples that have been sent to me from around the world, but crikey, there's loads and loads of them that portray the same basic symbol of, again, fighting the snake, fighting the dragon is all part of it. And of course, one of the key stories in the Bible is of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, which, when you read that story in the way it's portrayed, absolutely changed the way that humans acted and saw themselves in the world. When you see the symbolic way that it's talked about. And I was on a Christian radio station in America a few months back, and they said, oh no, serpents and all that. I said, well, hold on a second. Do you think that if you believe the Garden of Eden story, and again, the Garden of Eden story told in different ways using different names, you can find that all over the world as well. Same recurring theme. And I said, do you really think that if you believe it to be, that the serpent in the Garden of Eden was a snake on the ground? Could you think it could be that could be symbolic of something? And it's just another example of the reptilian symbolism all over the place. And when you look at the castles and the stately homes of these bloodlines in the aristocracy, and also in the churches as well, and they're behind them, and they were behind the building of them, then again, you find these what we call gargoyles that have a reptilian feel about them. And the coats of arms of so many of these aristocratic families carry the dragon in various forms. Some people, and there is a lot of truth and accuracy in it, describe London as Babylondon, because that became the new center of this bloodline network. And that's why this tiny bloody country just off the coast of Europe had that empire that spanned the world. How could that be? Because that was the center of their operations, and therefore was the center of their empire. And so appropriately, the very symbol of the City of London, the financial district, the original City of London, where St. Paul's Cathedral is and all the financial stuff, where they've messed around with the global financial situation as we're currently experiencing, the symbol is two flying reptiles holding the shield of a very significant secret society within the Illuminati web called the Knights Templar that control London. Here it is. Very appropriate, and I would suggest not without coincidence, or not coincidence. When you pass into the City of London from the main urban sprawl of London and stuff, you pass these flying reptiles on each side of the road holding this Knights Templar shield. And the district of the City of London, which controls so much of world finance, runs into what is known as the Temple in London, which is named after a Knights Templar temple. And at the point, and that's where so much of the global, not just British, but the global and certainly the Commonwealth law network is controlled from. At the point where those two meet, the City of London and the Temple, is this flying reptile at in the center of the road at a place called Temple Bar. And then when you look at the recurring themes of dragons and reptilian monster figures in myths and stories, they go on and on and on. And of course, the whole basis of the Chinese culture and many of the Eastern cultures is of the dragon. And yes, things like ley lines were symbolized as dragon lines and all the rest of it, but that's not the only explanation for it. Why would the ancient emperors of China say, we claim to be emperor because of our descendants from the ley lines? I mean, they wouldn't do that. They said descendants from the serpent gods. That was their symbolism of the serpent, the gods. The word Messiah comes from Mesa, which is the fat of the Nile crocodile, which they used to use to anoint pharaohs. Christ itself means anointed one. And even the devil in the Bible is described as in reptilian terms. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, and Satan, who deceiveth the whole world, he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And this theme of fallen angels, again, drops into this same theme of this takeover, which has been gathering pace through the centuries and now is where it is today. This is a painting by Credo Mutwa in South Africa, not far from the Kalahari Desert, which is a painting on his hut, which is symbolizing an ancient African story of the Chitahuri and how they ate people. And this is Alfa Romeo, which is straight from that ancient myth. I mean, why would Alfa Romeo have a bloody snake in a human? It's a bloody car. And next to it, of course, is the red cross on the white background of the Knights Templar secret society. This is a home of Silvio Berlusconi, who thinks after an earthquake disaster, just see it as having a weekend of camping. I mean, this man's not real, but he's leader of Italy. When you saw that story, that's what he said, that the people in that earthquake zone should see it as, a weekend of camping. I mean, you can't make these people up. They have no empathy. And again, here's that same theme. The fairy stories and the fairy tales of the frog turning into the prince and all these constant themes relates to the same stuff in the ancient world coming through to today. And this is a book that's given to some American school children, and it's about shape-shifting from reptilian into human. And they say I'm crazy, and they're giving it to school kids. Oh, it's just a story. No, it's not. I wish it was. And this is a point, and this has got me tremendous ridicule. I don't care. I'm bothered. But shape-shifting, right? This is another recurring theme, not just in the endless people now around the world who said, yeah, I saw that, I've experienced that, seeing someone move from a human to a reptilian form and back again. You find this too in the ancient accounts, the shapeshifters, and not just into reptilian, but into other forms as well. And then, again, I keep saying it, this is why the first part of this presentation was so important, because without that, we really can't get a fix on some of this stuff. People say, and I understand it completely, you can't shift from a solid body to a solid body and back again. It's daft. I agree completely. You can't. But that's not what's happening. These different physical forms are energetic fields. Let's go back to that image from earlier of the energy field. It goes through the decoding system and becomes an apparently physical form that we see in our everyday life. Shape-shifting takes place in one place only, in the decoding system of the brain, which again itself is a vibrational field beyond the physical. So you have an energy field that is human, and you're decoding that into a human body. Then the reptilian level of that comes forward and becomes the dominant field, and suddenly you're decoding a different energy field, and then it returns and you're decoding this one again. In your decoded reality, in the experienced holographic physical world, you see someone human, you see him reptilian, you see him human. Did you see that? It's only going on in here. Of course, shape-shifting from solid to solid to solid is impossible, but that's not what it is. How appropriate. Because they're holograms. All physicality is holograms. It is an energetic field, and at the end, the level of the energetic field, because it's not solid, it's movable, changeable, and then becomes changeable in the decoded reality as we observe it in their head. That's where shape-shifting goes on. And again, we are perceiving, through what we call visible light, a tiny frequency range of human sight, human decoding. But just outside of this frequency range, and beyond into frequencies well away from this one, are endless kind of worlds and realities. And I say further away in that sense, but actually they're all sharing the same space. You know, in this space that I'm standing in now are all the radio and television stations broadcasting to Melbourne. I can't see them, they can't see each other, because they are operating on different frequencies. And when you tune into one of those frequencies, that's what you get. And what this physical body does is to tune us through that telescope I talked about earlier into and through the receiver-transmitter crystalline structure. It tunes us into this tiny range of frequencies called visible light, and this becomes the only reality. But interspersing this reality is all existence. And just outside of this frequency range, just beyond visible light, lie these reptilian entities and many other entities too. And you know, you'll be in a house and you'll see a cat, for instance, reacting to what is to us empty space. And you'll say, what's wrong with the cat? Don't be daft, nothing there. But to the cat, there is something there, because its visual frequency range is much greater than ours, and therefore it's seeing things in the space that we can't see. And it's because this knowledge is kept from us, that things that are happening in the world are dismissed as ridiculous, and people like me are dismissed as crazy, because it's a very simple, very powerful thing. And it sounds an obvious truth, but sometimes we miss the obvious truth. People's sense of what's possible comes from what they think is possible. And what they think is possible comes from the information they receive to tell them what is possible. If you suppress the knowledge of what is possible, you suppress their perception of what is possible, and they will laugh in the face of the truth and say it's impossible, when actually, if you understand to a greater level than the mainstream allows you to understand, you realize not only is it possible, it's perfectly bloody logical. So, just as we have ghosts, as we call them, which is energy just outside of our frequency range, and sometimes it just enters our frequency range and we can see it as ethereal. Whereas if it was absolutely on our frequency range, it would look as solid as you and me. It's like a radio station not being quite on the dial. You don't get a sharp reception, you get interference. And in the same way, these reptilian entities lock into these bloodlines and take over their mental and emotional faculties. I've talked to many psychics around the world who have the ability to go further out than the norm in terms of their decoding of sight. And they, many of them have told me how they've seen not just reptilian entities, but other entities too, non-human, who are what they call overshadowing humans as they observe them, and locking into these bottom two chakra points here, the base chakra and the one just above. And what they're doing, because the body's a hologram, is they're locking into that human energy field, and they're taking over its mental and emotional processes and perception processes. Now, let's go back. There you go. Oh yeah, we'll come to them in a sec. It's all about vibration and vibrational compatibility. These reptilian entities are vibrating to a certain frequency. Humans are vibrating to another frequency. What the hybrid idea is about is to infuse as much of this frequency, because that's what it's all about in the end, frequency, because that's the base prime reality of the hologram. It's to infuse as much of this frequency into this frequency to make them as compatible as possible, to allow this age-old recurring theme right up to the present day of possession to take place. And it's much easier to possess something that you are in vibrational resonance with, or much closer to it, than something that's very much further out. And so these hybrid bloodlines basically are there to create the vehicles that these reptilian entities just outside of this frequency can then take over. And they are manipulating this world through apparently human bodies, when if you could see further out, you would see anything but a human overshadowing these people that are in the positions of power. So these guys, I found this picture on the internet, it's very appropriate. These guys are basically empty shells. And they are vehicles to, I'm not saying every one of these are, but I think most of them are from what I'm looking at. But the basic theme is the people in positions of power are merely vehicles for something else that is in control of their faculties and control of their mind processes. So we have the advisors in the shadows within this reality, who really are in control of the people who appear to be in power. And then one step back from them, just outside of this visible light dimension, we have these entities that are calling the shots in so many ways through into this reality in terms of what happens here. And after my experience of this explanation of the schism and all the rest of it, I refer to these now as the schism people, because this schism resonates out down into this reality, this disharmonious conflict, chaos, and all the rest of it. And as it plays itself down into this reality, it manifests itself in various ways. And it is in those entities that lock into that schism energy, they manifest its state of being. They are expressions of it. And you find that these people do not have the basic values of compassion, empathy that most humans have, because they're locked into a deeply disharmonious and imbalanced consciousness that manifests out those values. And so to these people, pepper bombing Baghdad, they have no emotional consequence for that at all, because they have no empathy. Whereas we couldn't do it because we would have empathy with the consequences for others of their actions. And so they are operating on a completely different point of observation of life, reality, than we are. And therefore, anything goes with these people because of that. And these schism people, as they've taken control of human society, have created what? A human society that represents that schism. It's division. It's fighting with each other. It's trying to compete with each other, dominate each other, top dog, up the greasy pole. They're all manifestations of this basic energy disharmony. And so it goes up the levels from the human up through eventually to this schism energy. And all these things are manifestations within the decoded holographic world of the state of disharmony of this energetic schism, which has affected life in this reality, this part of it anyway, so fundamentally. So you have these reptilian entities, I'm sure other entities too, but the reptilian thing keeps coming up, who take over the thought process and mental processes. And we see the human, when we decode that energy field of human, but behind it is something looking very different. Someone sent me this picture. It may be just a play of the light, but it's symbolic of what so many people see. Some people see full body shifts. Talk to those people all around the world. But what seems to be the common theme more than anything is the eye shift, where they take on a reptilian type straight down pupil instead of the round one of the human, very much symbolized by this. And a few weeks ago, a scientist friend of mine called me and said he'd been chatting to an acquaintance of his who's just been doing, I don't agree with it, but he's just been doing research into iris scan technology, which led him to look very closely at 2,300 eyes as part of this research. And his friend didn't know anything about my stuff at all. He was just in a conversation, and he said that around 4% of the eyes that he looked at very closely appeared to be of reptilian type and appearance, which is maybe about the percentage we're looking at. Someone sent me this with Father George Bush. I don't know, I think that's, again, a play on the light almost certainly, but so symbolic, because I know a number of people have seen this guy shift. There's a magazine, it's called 40 Times or something. A few years ago, they ran this front page picture, taking the mick out of me, and I said, thank you very much. That was very symbolic. I love that. Thanks very much. And so you find a few of these pictures on the internet now as it gets around. Hey, there you go. And one of the things that I've looked at very closely over the years, particularly to the end of towards the 80s and early across 2000 and so, are the mind control projects and the satanic ritual abuse projects to help people who've been through that. And the number of times when people have been through satanic ritual abuse and all the rest of it, that they talk about in reptilian terms about what they experienced. And these were some pictures drawn by someone who went through satanic ritual abuse of the kind of things that she remembers from what happened in the rituals. And again, And the reason the therapist sent these to me, with the person's permission, of course, was because she was constantly drawing reptilian imagery, because that's what she experienced in the ritual. And if you remember Rosemary's Baby, that film of the 60s, which was directed by Roman Polanski, and shall we say he should bloody know, with Mia Farrow, and she was manipulated by a satanic family to be impregnated, to give birth to this child, and at the end of the movie, when you saw briefly the child in the crib, which was a hybrid, it had reptilian eyes very clearly. And
it lasts forever, but it was only 15 minutes. But it felt like hours, and it was frightening.
Because of that ego thing, because you realize you're small all of a sudden.
Yeah, once I realized that I'm nothing, I realized all my fancy clothes, my big clothes.
Can you explain to me why it makes you emotional just talking about it? Because I imagine the reason it makes you emotional is because for 4 decades you've been trying to find happy, man.
Well, you know, when you think you know everything, and then you realize you don't know anything. That's a big awakening. You can call it growth, or you can call it divine intervention.
You do realize you're talking about the toad like someone would talk about God, right?
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to say it's God. I'm not going to put nothing in the same breath as God.
Can you explain how it changed you?
It was just the death of your ego. When your ego died, I felt so naked and afraid at that particular time, because that's all I really had when you really think about it, was my ego.
Addicted to alcohol, cigarettes, food, even sex. What about painkillers? Researchers and some addicts are now turning their eyes to an illegal substance for help.
Researchers in Britain have found that psychedelic drugs can create a higher level of consciousness.
Why some psychiatrists and researchers are giving psychedelic drugs a second look.
This stuff is all too interesting just to go on keeping it swept under the rug. And meanwhile, the Inquisition was a long time ago. The birth of rationalism was a long time ago. At this point, there's no good reason, apart from bad habit, to keep up these barriers.
With the help of two concepts that are traditionally opposed, science and spirituality, we humbly reintroduce psychedelics back into the cultural dialogue.
As bizarre as it may sound, now, could this be a blindness miracle?
If anything, it just reminded me of my own fragility of my own consciousness and my own perceptions, and that there's another world right over there that is existing in a parallel way with my own world. So
it does seem to be that way, and you know, we could try and shy away from saying it, but it seems evident that it's something along those lines.
Yeah.
It blows my mind sometimes thinking about this, because the old me would have never been able to rationalize that. It was just like, okay, let's just forget that happened. That was weird, or you were mentally ill or something. You know, that's what you're trained to think. You know, if you're having these experiences, your brain isn't working, or it's doing something weird, or, you know, for a neuroscientist's point of view, you know, well, that's just this neuron overfiring and releasing too much glutamate, and, you know, it's all chemical response. But the fact that my body took a chemical and decided to give me a feeling of comfort and spirituality, and sort of went that way with it, was nice.
I've also been a fervent proponent of the psychedelic dimethyltryptamine, or DMT.
I can tell you about my positive experiences that I've had with a lot of different things in life. Natural psychedelic experiences like the use of an isolation tank. And me personally, I've gotten great benefit out of certain psychedelics, because I think they dissolve ego, and I think they offer you a view of the world that may not be possible without it. A lot of plants. There's many plants that contain DMT in it, including the human mind. The human mind produces it. The body produces it. It's produced in your liver. It's produced in your lungs. And they've even shown recently in tests with live rats that they are actually producing the pineal gland itself is actually producing dimethyltryptamine. And that is what they've always thought of as the third eye. The pineal gland is this thing that sits right in the middle of your head, and literally is your third eye. And certain reptiles, it actually has a retina and a lens.
The project, led by David Luke at the University of Greenwich, will focus on dimethyltryptamine, the most psychedelic drug in the world. Luke hopes that this project will help shed light on whether or not the powerful substances can offer a cure.
And it's thought that in certain states of consciousness, people can have experiences of mental imagery, perhaps even if they are congenitally blind.
Now, it's difficult to imagine a society more different from the society of ancient Egypt than our society today. We hate visionary states in this society. In our society, if we want to insult somebody, we call them a dreamer. In ancient societies, that was praise. And we have erected huge apparatuses of armed bureaucracies who will invade our privacy, who will break down our doors, who will arrest us, who will send us to prison, sometimes for years, for possessing even small quantities of psilocybin or substances like DMT, whether in its smokable form or in the ayahuasca brew. And yet, ironically, DMT is, we now know, a natural brain hormone. We all have it in our bodies, and it's just that its function remains unknown for lack of research.
Researchers across the nation are tuning in and turning on to psychedelics a few generations after psychologist Timothy Leary unintentionally stigmatized them. In the 1960s, Leary conducted a series of valid experiments with LSD and psilocybin. But as he devolved into an infamous psychedelic poster boy, the drugs escaped the lab.
The natural state of the brain is chaos.
In 1970, the federal government made the drugs illegal, in the same category as heroin. The mainstream medical community tapped out, even though there was a lot of data suggesting the drugs might help people with certain mental illnesses.
I was fascinated that how could this have been such a big part of psychiatry and that I never heard about it, completely buried in my training. And that just made me really curious to look further into it.
Why do you think that our body produces it?
We don't know. I mean, we need to research it. We need to find out. There's a lot of theories about it, which range from completely fantastical to, you know, the idea that it's just a part of normal human neurotransmitters and normal human neurochemistry, and that when you take a large dose of it, you just get this scrambled, crazy signal that you can misinterpret for being a conversation with God. You know, the people who believe it's an actual mystical experience believe that what it may very well be is a chemical gateway, and that there is another world beside the material world that we exist in, and that there is more than one way to experience this type of transcendent consciousness experience. Whether or not it's a hallucination or not, it is the exact same experience. So if you are actually going to another dimension and communicating with God, or whether you think you are because you're taking this psychedelic drug, the experience is indistinguishable to you.
And so there's just such a vast history that's kind of taboo to talk about, of course, because psychedelics are illegal. They're a very taboo source of dialogue in our society today. And you've also said that you don't follow any organized religion, Joe, but it seems like you're a very spiritual person.
It's not as though our society is opposed in principle to altered states of consciousness. I mean, billions are being made by the unholy alliance of psychiatrists and big pharma in overprescribing drugs to control so-called syndromes like depression or attention deficit disorder in teenagers. And we have a love affair in our society with alcohol. We glorify this most boring of drugs, despite the terrible consequences that it often has. And of course, we love our stimulants, our tea, our coffee, our energy drinks, our sugar, and huge industries are built around these substances, which are valued because of the way they alter consciousness. But what all these approved altered states of consciousness have in common is that none of them contradict or conflict with the basic state of consciousness valued by our society, which I would call the alert, problem-solving state of consciousness.
Why is it that in the entire Western world, these substances that have been found to be so interesting by hundreds of cultures for thousands of years are prohibited? How did these cultures that consider themselves to be enlightened, democratic, and scientific get to declaring plants illegal? It can seem weird, but there's clearly something deep and revealing about the nature of these societies.
Our society values alert, problem-solving consciousness, and it devalues all other states of consciousness. Any kind of consciousness that is not related to the production or consumption of material goods is stigmatized in our society today. Of course, we accept drunkenness. We allow people some brief respite from the material grind. A society that subscribes to that model is a society that is going to condemn states of consciousness that have nothing to do with the alert problem-solving mentality.
The fact that these studies are happening at all represents a mighty change in the scientific community, a renaissance in thinking about psychedelic drugs like MDMA, LSD, and psilocybin, the drug found in magic mushrooms.
Why has the war on drugs been such an abysmal failure?
Well, first of all, it's not really a war on drugs. It's a war on some drugs. And the drugs that are government sanctioned and they're taxing them, those are not illegal. Alcohol is available almost everywhere you look. It's one of the worst drugs we have. As far as the consequences of using it, it's one of the most screwed up drugs available to people, and it's everywhere. We just sort of understand that one shot of Jack Daniels has this effect, one beer has that effect, and it's because of the fact that it's pretty strictly regulated, and it's part of our culture and has been for a long time. We've just accepted the fact that this drug is at every restaurant you go to, is at every supermarket you go to, is in drugstores, it's everywhere. I mean, it's amazing. And there's nothing wrong with alcohol, don't get me wrong. I'm 100% down with you being able to do whatever you want to do with your body. But we're incredibly inconsistent. The amount of prescription drugs that are prescribed in this country points to that. The amount of people in this country that are hooked on meth, the amount of people in this country that are hooked on pharmaceutical drugs. These are huge, huge numbers. And then there's drugs like marijuana, which literally hurt almost no one.
But I think everybody realizes that the promise of a society over monopolistically based upon this state of consciousness has proved hollow, and that this model is no longer working, that it's broken in every possible sense that a model can be broken, and that urgently we need to find something to replace it. The vast problems of global pollution that have resulted from the single-minded pursuit of profit, the horrors of nuclear proliferation, the specter of hunger, that millions every night go to bed starving, that we can't even solve this problem despite our alert problem-solving state of consciousness. And look what's happening in the Amazon, the lungs of our planet, this precious home of biodiversity. The old-growth rainforest being cut down and replaced with soybean farms so we can feed cattle, so that we can all eat hamburgers. Only a truly insane global state of consciousness could allow such an abomination to occur. We can spend countless billions on warfare, on hatred, on fear, on suspicion, on division, but we can't get together the collective effort to save the lungs of our planet. And this is perhaps why shamans from the Amazon are now mounting a kind of reverse missionary activity. When I've asked shamans about the sickness of the West, they say it's quite simple. You guys have severed your connection with spirit. Unless you reconnect with spirit and do so soon, you're going to bring the whole house of cards down around your heads and ours.
Dimethyltryptamine, also known as DMT, and the spirit molecule.
Yeah, that's often a nickname it's been associated with.
The spirit molecule,
That is
right.
indeed.
Okay.
With people who have had kind of first-hand experience between these various different psychedelics, that there is a huge overlap, and many people report just having the exact same experiences with either of these psychedelics.
And DMT is the active component in ayahuasca.
And it is an interesting thing when you consider this is a banned substance. I think it's kind of, in America it's Schedule 1, which the definition of is, one of the conditions of making it Schedule 1 is it has to have no therapeutic use whatsoever. And I think as we've seen through the testimonials of other people, and with a lot of scientific research that's coming out now, that's not the case. And
it seems the most ridiculous thing to me to say.
Backwards.
Something with researchers out of the UK, something they want to do to find out if psychedelic drugs can actually help people whose brains are unable to form mental images, as bizarre as it may sound. Now, could this be a blindness miracle?
when he took the drug. He told researchers, quote, "I never had any visual images come to me. I can't see or imagine what light or dark might look like. During my psychedelic experiences, whenever I listened to music, I felt as if I were immersed in the most beautiful waterfall ever."
It was like just an oddly emotional feeling. It was very abstract. And then like the last thing that I remember from that first trip was like, it was almost like the Last Supper setting. Like, and I'm not even a deeply religious person. I was raised Catholic, but literally it felt like I was sitting at the Last Supper, and it was just like, this was completely normal. And then right after that, then I woke up and I was just like, did I just go to heaven? This is a really, this is bizarre. Like, that's not, I started off seeing shapes, and then there were cats, and then I felt like I fell out of space and ended up at the Last Supper in heaven or something. It was just such a weird, bizarre experience. And they're like, my friends were like, yeah, a lot of us have had similar experiences. It's like crossing over. And I'm going, crossing over where? They're like, oh, to the other side. And I'm going, none of this makes sense to me. It was very interesting to have a spiritual experience at the end, because again, I don't consider myself spiritual, and I'm going, why would my brain take me there, out of all the places? But I felt safe, I felt comfortable, I felt accepted.
I did feel that for the longest time, but there's just something about a lot of my later experiences that it did feel like I was connecting with some sort, I hate to use the word spirit, but that's really kind of what it feels like.
There was a sense around it that there was something special, that it wasn't like anything else. There wasn't like other psychedelics. Its intensity and speed was such that it really produced a different kind of response. I mean, I remember almost getting the sense that it was kind of like a psychedelic bungee jump, that there was a kind of raw leap into this rapidly changing environment that was very different than the more gradual approaches of other psychedelics.
And I've also been interested in kind of tapping into these states more without the use of any kind of psychedelic, because I do think it is more a window into these states of awareness, but it's not an actual doorway. I think it puts you into a certain alignment that allows you to be in the state of mind. But if you're constantly relying on something else to get you into that, then you never really learn how to walk yourself.
Yeah, so you're saying it's a window, not a doorway.
One of the things, besides what it does, one of the things about DMT that always fascinated me was the fact that it's such a simple molecule. It's everywhere. So all organisms have tryptophan. And all organisms have the two key enzymes that lead to the synthesis of DMT. And these enzymes are very ancient enzymes. They're all over the place. They're, again, part of basic metabolism. So theoretically, anything could synthesize DMT.
DMT is astonishingly widely available in plants and animals all around the world, but so far nobody really knows why it's there or what its function is.
That's the $64 billion question, is why is DMT in our bodies? Why is it in plants, in all sorts of mammals? And what is the role it plays in humans?
The conventional wisdom 30, 40 years ago was that these things had no real function. They were just sort of physiological noise, but that's a very naive understanding. And what we now understand is that these secondary compounds are, in a sense, the language of plants.
Why is it that human beings' central nervous system are wired to receive this experience? Must be that there's important information to be learned.
So I don't think it's universally present in nature by accident.
I ask that you suspend any opinions, either negative or positive, about these compounds. Whatever you believe their value to be, they continue to have profound effects wherever we find their use, whether it's contemporary Western culture or in the Amazon rainforest.
And so, I mean, what I tapped into with the DMT, and it's again this exact same realm that I keep tapping into time after time with experiences with the ayahuasca. And I felt myself, and I've had a lot of other people report to me as well when they go through this themselves, there's this huge sense of familiarity to this place that you tap into. It feels like you're tapping into the very core of yourself. And the type of aesthetic design of this place was a kind of multicolored cathedral of some sort, kind of castle-like. And I remember kind of being in the presence of some other being who was kind of leading me through this space. So it was kind of welcoming me back almost. And kind of what I felt with this space, what I feel like I've tapped into with this, and I've gone through many experiences with the ayahuasca, is that you're tapping into a kind of part of a more soulful part of yourself. I've gone through experiences with the ayahuasca, and it feels like the experience of life on Earth is that people have this multi-dimensional existence, I call it. It's just ideas I'm playing with right now, but you get this huge sense that you are present beyond this veil that is kind of lifted temporarily with the psychedelic. And it's almost as if you're a soul having the experience of a physical body. I know many other people have had that same type of feeling with it. And
if there's some soul there's something beyond the physical.
Yeah, there is this sensation that the consciousness you have is something more than just a body.
Okay.
And I could feel that. I could feel this very strong presence of this kind of very force of life, the very force of existence that was living through me.
And so you say you originally sought out the DMT to help deal with childhood trauma. I think we've really lost our ways to purge this trauma in Western society. We've lost a lot of the ancient traditions and ancient medicines that allowed people to do so. And instead we're being given medicines that are more of a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. They don't actually get to the core to treat that trauma.
And it made me want to go try it again at some other point.
Wow.
No, it was insane. And all this happened over like 6 minutes, but it felt like, to me, it felt like this was like maybe 2 or 3 hours. And it was just like, oh no, you were just in there for 6 minutes.
And I'd like you to explain this to me, the toad. I'd like you to explain the toad to me.
Do you understand the toad?
Is it like ayahuasca?
No, it takes you to another level. Ayahuasca is nothing compared to this.
Is it called DMT?
Yes. The toad, and it's in the Sonora Desert and has a venom in it. And you smoke it. Once I tried it, boom! Everything just went so fast. And when I fell out, the only thing I was conscious about, I was out. My brain was still functioning, my thoughts, I could still talk to myself, I could hear my mind, and I was saying, I fucked up. And I killed myself.
Because you killed the ego?
I'm dying. It was just really mind-blowing.
Spiritual in nature, though, right? Like you're just...
Yeah, really, my whole life totally changed. It sounds like a movie script, but it's really the real deal.
At that moment, you're talking about like you come to and you are altered. You are altered and it stayed.
I don't know. I wake up, I'm happy, I'm laughing, I'm smiling, I'm thinking, what the
Really?
happened? Yeah.
Really?
Had no idea.
So sex, cocaine, championship belt, those weren't happiness?
Nothing, no. It lasts forever, but it was only 15 minutes. But it felt like hours. And it was frightening.
Because of that ego thing, because you realize you're small all of a sudden.
Yeah, once I realized that I'm nothing,
And how it changed you?
It was just the death of your ego. Now when your ego died, I felt so naked and afraid at that particular time because that's all I really had when you really think about it was my ego.
That's interesting because your ego served you too, or in some of the ways that other people would measure success.
Oh, no doubt, 100%. It made me that guy that I really wasn't interested in as I got older, but that made me a very special and famous person.
What can you tell me about how that ego was formed?
Well, it all started with Customano. I never knew what an ego was until he expressed to me what an ego was and how the most successful people have the biggest egos.
I believe he will be the youngest heavyweight champion of all time.
And I just believed what he told me. You know what I mean? And everything he told me was right. Everything he told me gave me success and gave me all the power that I thought I ever wanted.
Did Cuss give you any of the tools to shut off the ego?
No. Why would he do that? All the only thing that I had was my ego.
Is that the first time you felt sort of love and safety?
100%, yeah.
Tell me about that first time. Where were you? What was the setting like? Were you freaked out? Were you nervous?
I will just say, for legal purposes, this was not in the U.S. No, joking. I was with a group of friends, and in a very relaxed setting. We had some DMT, but then things started changing. So I started having, it was almost like it became sort of like a little bit of a video game. This is very bizarre. After that played out a while, there was like a distortion of the reality there. Like what I was seeing was no longer like a 3D world. It became like a 4D world, which it was like time and space was bending. And then I had the sensation of starting to fall, which was really interesting. It should have been terrifying at the moment because like it was like I was falling into a black hole. That's what it felt like. But falling, and finally I sort of fell, and then I felt like I was floating, and it was very white, like sparkly type world, and literally it sounds really cheesy, but it sounded sort of like heaven-like.
And I could already start to feel this tremendous separation.
I reached across, and it was suddenly I'm in the universe, in this huge void with these beings on the other side, and I put out my hands, and this incredible rainbow of pink light went between me and these entities. And I was trying to make it be like a white light, but it was this incredible pink light, this energy of love this capacity of love that we as human beings have, that I was trying to just send to them.
How did DMT help you deal with your childhood trauma?
I've even had trips where I felt like I was lifted up, and it's very odd to describe this, but it feels like there's these tall people that are standing up like almost over the earth and looking down on us, and like they're gods or whatever that they are, but they have like a big eye. And I've had one trip where literally I felt like I was looking through their eye at the world below, and like I was a caretaker. I cared about the beings below. Like all those beings were all like encircled around like the earth and like touching each other and like infusing their energy in the earth. And I just felt that power and that love and that compassion. And I just felt like I needed to bring that love and compassion of everyone back into the world with me.
And there were these winged beings. I don't remember exactly what they looked, but were like angels, something like angels, that were majestically kind of flying through the space. But there was something about the quality of how they were flying that was unique. I'd never seen anything like it. It was like, I don't know, the sense of another realm that was there. My sense was at some point there was this implicit sense, this is the divine realm. This is the divine realm. And it was not like a thought, but it was like this implicit kind of grokking recognition.
It was all very, very impersonal until I got to the space where I realized that I was in the area where souls await rebirth. And I was there, and I had been there so many times before. I recognized it, and this incredible transcendent peace came over me. I have never in my life ever felt such peace. Everything was stripped away. Every hope, every fear, every attachment to the material world was completely stripped out of me. I was free to just be the essence of a soul.
After the medicine wore off, there is that familiar sensation of kind of coming back into the body. And I do remember that. That was part of almost all of those experiences of kind of coalescing back into sensory awareness and a sense of having a body, and of that becoming a little more substantial, and then say, oh yeah, here I am, and I live in a body, and I'm okay.
What you saw, what you felt, I'll leave it to you.
Okay, jumping right into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, usually when I go straight into it, there's this instance that comes up, and it came again during this experience. And when I'm smoking this and about to break through, I always have this very odd sensation of some kind of outside observation of me. I don't know what it is. It's a form of a consciousness part of my own self that's kind of looking back at me. But it's a very strong sensation, and
someone's watching you.
Yeah, I don't want to put it in quite those paranoid terms, but there definitely feels to be some kind of external energy that's kind of observing you through this, in a sense. And it's always a very familiar sensation I go through. And I also went through the signature process of having this noise that picks up in frequency and gets louder and louder as this begins to take effect. And the myth of that was this is the noise the pineal gland makes upon activation.
Right, the pineal gland, the third eye.
Which is the third eye, yeah.
Right.
This is of course just myth, but it's an interesting idea to think about.
The countdown was like, counting down preparing for your death, like waiting to surrender. And you'd feel the coldness, and the coldness just going through your veins, and it's really indescribable. It's hard to, it's like ice going through your veins. This burning sensation would happen on the back of my neck. I mean, this was reliable. This is like clockwork. This happened every time that you shot me up with DMT. And then there'd be a hum. And the hum would get louder and louder. And to the point where it broke apart everything that I was or knew. It just got louder and louder until you just had to surrender to the sound. And then you were there.
I would get a warm, full feeling, a golden feeling in my chest before it went to my head. And I'd feel this warm rod about 1.5 inches in diameter start growing up inside my central channel. It would come up and sort of slow, warm up my chest, go up through my head, and slow down and put tremendous pressure in my sinuses behind my eyes, and slow down, start to grow and distend the skin behind my forehead about 1 inch, behind my hairline. And when it had, I was afraid it was going to pop my skin a few times because it was a very physical feeling. About 1.5 inches, 2 inches above my skull, when it popped through there, then the psychedelic trip would start. I thought I died. I saw the white clouds, the Renaissance white fluffy clouds with the gods and the angels and all that stuff is what I saw. I thought I was dying and going out, but I did take a quick look at Cindy and a quick look at Rick because I had my eyes open, and they were both there watching, looking very calm. And I go, oh, that's really good news. My body looks fine.
So I didn't know whether it was my birth I was re-experiencing, my death which was yet to come, because I know that time crumbles. The linearity of time is totally meaningless in these states. You are at the Godhead, the point where all time folds in on itself.
I think DMT is a forcible reminder that there's a lot more about reality, the universe, ourselves, the biosphere, whatever, that there's a lot more to it than we imagine.
It seems our reality is not the only reality. Occasionally the cracks reveal themselves and may even want to be discovered.
Let's go rather to the ancient Egyptians who put their best minds to work for 3,000 years on the problem of death and on the problem of how we should live our lives to prepare for what we will confront after death. And the ancient Egyptians expressed their ideas in transcendent art, which still touches us emotionally today, and they came to certain very specific conclusions that the soul does survive death and that we will be held accountable for every thought, every action, every deed that we have lived through in our lives. So we better take this precious opportunity to be born in a human body seriously and make the most of it. And in these inquiries into the mystery of death, the ancient Egyptians weren't just exercising their imaginations. They highly valued dream states, and it's now known that they used visionary plants like the hallucinogenic blue water lily. And it's interesting that the ancient Egyptian tree of life has recently been identified as the Acacia nilotica, which contains high quantities of DMT, dimethyltryptamine, the same active ingredient that we find in ayahuasca.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of substances and things like alcohol are a way to sort of get you away from yourself, but ayahuasca is a substance that makes you face things about yourself, and I think that's the main difference.
Right. It's like they said that certain drugs help you tune out, and then the ayahuasca makes you tune in.
I think
Maybe
very
to
much so.
a way that you're just not ready for. Cause it
Yeah, so, and it can be very overwhelming for people.
Yeah, as I said, it's like putting a mirror up to your soul, and you get to see how you've been treating the rest of the world, and usually it's not good news.
Yeah.
That's the way I kind of describe it.
Part of our work is to respect these medicines, and then to change the culture enough that people doing them can be respected and held, and not everybody needs to do them, not everybody should or wants to, but that it isn't pushed to the side. And so part of that does involve then research, because that's how in our reductionist society we validate things.